Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. Do They Really Have No Shame? By Dr. George Simon, PhD, from counselingresource.com. Great author, great site. Most folks know the feeling of shame so well, they can hardly understand that character-impaired people may have different underlying motives for their behavior. Erroneous notions about human nature may make sense in the context of neurotic personalities, but when trying to understand character impairment, they leave us vulnerable to abuse and manipulation. Just recently, I received an email from a woman who had come to realize that the person she lived with for many years was the archetypical character I described in my book, In Sheep's Clothing, Amazon.com. Check it out. Yet she was still finding it difficult to shed some notions about human nature that might even have contributed to the deception to which she had fallen prey. This email was so similar to so many others I have received over the years that I thought it worth sharing, edited, and commenting upon. Dr. Simon, I love your work, but I have to disagree with the way you say concerning shame. I have to disagree with what you say concerning shame and disturbed characters. If they really felt no shame, like you say, why would they go through so much trouble to disguise their real personality and pretend to be so wonderful to others? I realize now that I lived with a disturbed character for 22 years. He was the covert type you describe. When I finally caught him on some of his behavior and exposed him for the person he really is, he became more overtly aggressive, vicious, and vindictive than I can tell you. And if anyone ever criticized him even a little, he would brush them out of his life. You were not allowed to shame him in any way. Doesn't that mean he was extra sensitive to shame? I worked in a prison for 15 years, and I remember one prisoner always telling me he was a good guy and would not be incarcerated if it weren't for the police. Of course, the fact that he committed armed robbery in a store was not even an issue in his mind. I remember just how ridiculous his mindset was. But it turned out that my husband was just this type of guy. He kept up a good pretense, but all the while was doing horrible things. The only thing that really mattered to him was that he did not get caught. Once I saw his game, I ended his comfortable life by not providing for him anymore. He tried all the tactics in your book, and even though I learned how to recognize them all, I still could not confront him face on. I finally just decided to get out just to save my life and sanity. It's natural for decent folks to find some things unimaginable. It's also common for us to use our own experience and self-reflections to conjecture what the underlying motives of someone else might be when they do things that perplex us. We know how ashamed of ourselves we might feel if a thoughtless or insensitive remark we made about someone somehow got back to them. We might deny that we ever made the remark or put as positive a spin on it as we could, as a means of damage control. It's natural, therefore, that when we see someone else engaging in behavior similar to what we did, meaning engaging in denial or distorting reality, we presume that their motivation for doing so is the same as ours would have been. Here's how I responded to the email. You ask a great question, namely, why else other than shame would someone go to great lengths to conceal their real nature? First, it's important to remember that a character disturbance is a dimension of personality that exists along a continuum, so the extent to which someone is shame deficient varies from those with some degree of it to those who totally lack the capacity for it. But to answer your question more directly, there are literally hundreds of reasons why someone would disguise their real personality or intentions, besides being ashamed of who they are. And the fact that people who actually have the capacity for shame and guilt have a hard time imagining what those hundreds of other possibilities might be is a testament to their own good character. It is also, however, the most important reason they sometimes get taken in. Let me illustrate with just one example. Let's say a personal finance con artist wants you to contribute to his Ponzi scheme. The reason he will come across as caring about your welfare, appear genteel, or promote the notion that others view him as wonderful or trustworthy is not because he's ashamed of who he really is. That would actually deter him from going after you, but rather because he wants you to drop any possible resistance or hesitancy you might have and cooperate with his scheme. If he tells you who he really is and what he's up to, you wouldn't go along. He's not ashamed. He's simply determined to get the better of you and has a method to do so. Just remember, it's bad enough that we sometimes realize only after the fact that people aren't who they claim to be. It's even more insidious that so many of us have bought into misleading notions about why people do the things that set us up to be victimized. I'm not saying all disturbed characters are completely shameless and heartless. There's a continuum, but I'm saying they're all shame and guilt deficient to some degree, and that's exactly what distinguishes them from neurotics. So it's very dangerous to entertain the kinds of assumptions we've commonly held about why they sometimes engage in pretense. Playing the game of impression management for self-serving and exploitive purposes is not the same as trying to cover up a sense of shame. Even embarrassment or displeasure at being exposed is not the same as shame. I explain this in my book, Character Disturbance, available on Amazon.com. Shame is the "I just couldn't live with myself" kind of sentiment that keeps a person from deliberately doing the unthinkable. The most revealing sign of a decent character is the trouble they might have even imagining how someone could not experience the same shame or guilt that they themselves would experience doing certain things.